Hodor! Hi everybody! This is JPar, and you are listening to the We Promise Nothing Show. Today on the show, we have Kathy, we have Dabu, and from Talk Nerdy, we have Steve. Say hello to the crowd, everybody.
What's up?
Heyo.
Heyo. And we are here to don the black and talk about Game of Thrones, the finale. So we reviewed it before, but we weren't even near the end of the series. Now that the series is done, we are here to discuss, was it good? Did it live up to the rest of the series? Was it awesome, or did it disappoint? Well, I think you already know the answer to that, folks, because you've been on the internet before. So let's take it away on this side. But before we get into the final season, we're going to get into our first impressions of this series overall. And we're going to start right here with Kathy.
Okay. Hi,
Shouldn't have sat on my left.
Exactly. I should know better. I've always loved from the Game of Thrones, right from the opening song or whatever. I was hooked. You know, I like.
How's that go again?
Everywhere you look.
Everywhere there's a place.
Wrong.
Somebody.
No. Wrong.
Game of Thrones, yeah. Game of Thrones, yeah. Thrones. Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones. Game of Thrones, yeah. Game of Thrones, yeah.
Anyways. So ever since that moment, I just liked everything. I liked everything about it. I liked the actors. I liked the sets. I liked, everything. Just basically everything about it. The way it looked, the way it sounded, the way it progressed. I was very excited right from the beginning.
All right. Hyped from the get-go was Kathy and Steve.
I pretty much where Kathy was in terms of how excited I was for the TV show. I was really hyped about it. I mean, you started with the books, so I knew a little bit about what I was going into. But I mean, last two seasons left a little bit of a bitter taste in my mouth. But that being said, overall, the series is still excellent.
Okay. And what were your first... Oh, you said you started with the books, right, Steve?
I did, yeah.
Okay, great. And Dabu, first impressions.
I would like to say I wish I wanted to start with the books and then led into the show, but I think I went backwards that way. I think I got introduced to the show.
That's because you're French. That's
was it? Yeah, like a lot of Frenchmen, I do things backwards. Yeah. Well, I think about the books, I think after the show had initiated, or maybe right around the same time. So I think the book lover in me wanted to see the movie as I was reading the book to see if they were kind of matching in some ways, but that was a bad idea. Because the show got so far ahead of me that I couldn't keep up with the books. But my impressions going into this were that right from the beginning, as the two of you had already said, there was so many great surprises along the way, and I think a lot of them were genuinely shocking. Because I think that's the one thing I think that comes to mind that this show was really known for is its shock factor. It had a lot of means of being able to keep you on the edge of your seat in so many different ways. Whether it be emotionally or whether through tension or some other means, that there was always something they did and threw at you that you just didn't expect. And I think that's one of the running trademarks that the show had going for itself for the longest time, is that there was always a shocker with almost every episode that would come by. So having said that, I think that's why when we refer to the ending of our beloved series, it's not the same effect. But we'll get into those details later. So yeah, going in first, it was a hell of a strong start.
All right. I mean, just looking from the outside, this is something that was like geared for me because I love fantasy storytelling. I love Lord of the Rings. I love D&D. I love that kind of thing. As soon as you do like a fantasy medieval element, I'm just like, okay, sign me up, So it's just like on the outside, I'm just like, all right, this is interesting already. So I think it was, but I didn't get into it right away. I think I got into the third season. You started getting me into it there, Dabu, and we started watching it. And I think it was only a couple episodes before the Red Wedding. So I've heard a lot about this series. I'm like, oh, this is a series I want to check out, right? But I could never get into it. Like, every time I tune in, I'd always be tuning into the middle of the story, and I didn't know, like, who was who, what was what. It's definitely a series you gotta watch from the beginning to the end, because you gotta know who and what is going on, right? So, like I said, you know, I wasn't really far into the series. I mean, I think you got me into the series, so I think when you got me into the series, only a couple weeks before the Red Wedding, and I'm like, oh, okay, this actually is a good series, I'm gonna get into it. So I went back and I watched the first season. Well, I finished the first season, and I had a feeling, you know, Sean Bean was, by the way, spoilers, folks, that Sean Bean is gonna die, because that's what Sean Bean does in movies. So I'm like, alright, but, you know, it's just like, oh, they killed, like, even though I knew it was coming, it was just like, damn, they killed Ned Stark, those bastards, you know? And then, so I watched that, and I think that night we watched, like, the second last episode of the third season, The Red Wedding. I remember looking at you, I'm like, fuck you, Dave, I'm not watching this show anymore! I was pissed. Kill all the heroes off. But anyways, yeah, so that was my first impression, but, you know, eventually I grew to love the show, even though it's, you know, it hurt me in many ways.
Not the least of which is the last season.
Yeah.
Yeah, that doesn't count that yet.
Okay, so,
Lone Wolf.
That's a bleeding wound still.
Okay, so this series, I mean, it's fair to say that we all enjoy this series, right? So let's do our take on the series before the final season. So what's the build up? How does it feel like? And they took a year off too. So they took a year to prepare for this final season to get us ready for this final season. So we're going to review quickly just seasons 1 to 7, what we think quickly about that. So your thoughts, without revealing anything from season 8, just your thoughts and the anticipation going into season 8.
Well, the entire show, like Boo had mentioned, is that there was a lot of tensions and whatever, and some parts were actually hard to watch, but I was still very excited about it. Like, you know, I found out, it's like, oh my god, they kill children in this series. You know, they
break all rules.
They
basically
break all the rules. It was always surprising and shocking. Like, you think you know what's gonna happen, and then Game of Thrones says no, Kathy, and smack. You know what I mean? So it just kept me going along like that. I fell in love with the Starks from the get-go.
Well, yeah, and I think we almost, like us being Canadians, we almost like, oh, they're from the north, we're from the north, they're awesome, we're awesome, you know, like.
Mm-hmm. You know, hated Cersei from the beginning. That just kind of stuck with me forever. You know, that never actually went away.
Even though Eddie's like tremendous.
I even enjoyed the animals in all the all the seasons leading up to season 8 or whatever. I like the progression of the story. I like how, you know, it kept you on the edge of your seat, like, through all of their stories. Like, there wasn't really one main character of the story. There were several, and it kept your attention, and you wanted to know about these people through the entire thing. And near the end, like approaching the 8th season, I became very stressed, and it was very difficult to watch, and I just wanted, like, what are they going to do? You know what I mean? You know, through the heartbreaks, and I was hoping that the 8th season would actually be a fitting conclusion to how I felt through the entire the series, and I will tell you what I feel about the 8th season later. But yeah, no, I just there's so much. It is like so much I can't even pinpoint little pieces to talk about, you know, because it's just a general feeling that I had through the whole. Like, I was disappointed a lot because of my favorite characters dying. I was excited a lot because the characters that I hated died, you know. I was sad for the animals that died, you know what I mean?
You always said you did favor Joffrey above all other people.
Oh, that made me, yeah, the Joffrey death made me extraordinarily happy. I think I like want to rewind and watch it over and over again, as gross as it was. I didn't care. I'm like, yes, down, you know. But yeah, that's
Prince down! It's just Joffrey, don't worry.
Well, like Joffrey was suffering, and then Cersei was brokenhearted. I'm like, take that, bitch, you know, and everything like that. I can't even. It was just beautiful moments.
All right, Steve.
All right, so I think starting watching this, I loved just the near perfect execution of the vision that was portrayed in the books that I had read, that I'd come to love, and I still pretty fresh. Like, I hadn't read them when I was a kid, or when I heard that they were going to make Game of Thrones, and I was like, well, I don't want to watch this before reading the source material because that's how I am. So that's what I did. So I was still pretty fresh from the books, but I had read them at that point, and so watching this, that on every level. The cinematography, the acting, the storytelling, everything was pristine. Like, you could really throw yourself into this series, really bite down on it and feel satisfied.
Yes.
And as time went on, that feeling didn't change for a long time. They did such a good job with the Game of Thrones because they had such rich source material to draw from, I think.
Yeah.
And because they had pooled such talented people to work with.
Yeah.
You can't just say, oh, the books are the best and that's all there is. There's so much more that the show brings to this content. And the portrayals of the character are so rich and well done that you can't just say, oh, it's all the books. But that being said, when you hit season 7, like season 6, end of season 6, and season 7, like this is a tired older friend. Nobody's not treading new ground here. But I did feel like there was a downhill progression, towards the end of the series when they stopped having that source material to draw from.
Right. Which was, and for people who don't know, and the source material stopped the season when Jon Snow dies.
Yes.
Or doesn't die.
Well, we didn't know. We didn't know at the point where Jon Snow died. At that point in the series, that's where the books had ended. And
yes,
so
everyone was frothing at the mouth. Oh my God, is Jon Snow dead? We don't know. There's nothing past here in the books.
Nobody knows. And the book readers couldn't be all smug about it because they were like, I don't know.
Yeah.
And I mean, I definitely had a feeling of dread that did not go away. That's kind of built at the same level as my exuberance for the show. Because I was like, I could see the writing on the wall, right? You can see, okay, where they're gonna go. I didn't want to know the end of this book because, like I said, I like knowing the source material and reading the books and reading what this is based on before watching it. And now I kind of had that. I could have not watched the show, I guess, for season 7 and 8. I could have just not watched it.
Yeah, but come on.
So yeah, that's where I stand. That's what I think about it.
Okay, Dabu.
Well, I mean, you guys did touch upon a lot of great topics. I mean, whether it be the tension or whether it be the way they would kill off characters in such a way that I'm glad that, Steve, you put it in a very, really refined way, which was it was such an excellent execution in that it was almost impossible to see how they could top it every other moment. And yet they did.
And they did.
They seemed to figure out this formula where as the episodes would go by and as we were going from one season into the next, they knew exactly the steps that would be needed to be taken to get to that climactic ending of a season and to leave us on such a cliffhanger that we were frothing at the mouth, so to speak, for the next season, and so on and so forth. So to me, that was probably the best thing about the series is going into it, before knowing what was happening to our poor ending. We all had these huge excitements every time an episode would come out, week after week, every Sunday, So, and for me, it had been a long while since I had a show that actually did that to me. I think we're all at a point now where binge watching shows is such a common thing now that our expectations are so much higher that it is really quite difficult. I can imagine the amount of stress the writers go through just to see whether or not they'll have something in their hands that actually will captivate the audience. We don't know until we react to it, right? And I think Game of Thrones was a nice blend, in my opinion. It was a nice blend of medieval meets fantasy, but with not too much fantasy, because fantasy can get so far-fetched, you end up with basically another Lord of the Rings kind of scenario.
Which is also good.
Which is great. Nothing wrong with that. No, I agree. That would have been great in its own way, but that wasn't the personality or the tone that I got with this series right from the beginning, was that it was like it kept trying to distinguish itself from the rest of all these other fantasy novels, even though it's still fantasy, but they ground themselves in a certain sense of realism that keeps me really caught up in the moment, I think is the way it is. When you want to relate to a character. The only way to relate to someone is if you feel it's believable, and the only way to make it believable is if there's not too much, fantasy going on around. And I think that's what was really drawing me in the most. So all the way up until the ending of our last, couple of seasons there, I was getting a lot of excitement. There was so much going on that there was no quiet moment, and I loved it every other moment.
Mm-hmm. And for me personally, I love this series going, like, season 1 to 7 is immaculate. I mean, even, like, up to, 5 is the one where 6 they take over? Which season does the source material stop?
7 is
6 and 7, eh?
Yeah, I mean, you still had the notes they had given, and
yes,
like
they
that.
still had George R.R. Martin's notes.
Yeah.
However, they weren't working from the books anymore. And so I like you said, everything was delivered perfectly. The sets were perfect. The costumes were perfect. The acting was on par. You had great actors in Kit Harington and Maisie Williams and others. Obviously, we have Sean Bean here. We got many, many other good actors. Lena Headey is a perfect villain for Cersei because we all hate her so much. And you think, oh, as soon as I see her, I'm going to hate her. But I've seen her in other stuff, and I'm like, oh, wait a minute, that's Lena Headey. I'm like, oh. She really is a good actress because I don't hate her at this moment. But it's like, so it has got great actors on it. And I mean, to say what you want about that little bastard Joffrey, but he was a good actor too, that little shit.
They all were. Yeah.
So I'm saying it had everything there. And that's what I'm saying. That's what I do like about it. I'm going to copy what Dave's saying here. Yes, it's very easy to fall into that slump where you're Lord of the Rings and it's like fantasy just out the wazoo, you're just another, but before you know it, you're just another knockoff, like Aragon, or, like...
Was it Aragorn you were thinking of?
No, not Aragorn. Aragorn is in Lord of the Rings. He's not a ripoff of Lord of the Rings. Aragon.
Oh, Aragon, sorry, yeah.
Which is about the dragons and also...
Oh, yeah.
Sorry, yeah.
I forgot
about that.
And what's that one with... anyways, there's other ones. They're very much, you could just tell they're very...
Dragonheart.
Well, Dragonheart came before Lord of the Rings, but there is many others that you could just tell, and it's like it very easily falls into that slump. But that's why it was so great, because you mentioned the little realism came out of, even though the first scene is a fantasy scene because it's dealing with the White Walkers, the rest of the series, you don't really see that. You just see like how these families are relating to each other, and you get really involved with the families, and like the Starks against the Lannisters and against the Baratheons, and it's just like you get involved in that. You want to see you want your person to be the winner on the throne. That's what you want. And in some weird way, it almost has like a sporting event thing to it, because everyone's like, oh, there's like death pools, and like everyone's get obsessed with it. It's like, oh, who's gonna be the one on the throne, like. So it was really exciting all going up to there, and then that heartbreaking season finale of like Jon dying. You're like, oh my god, they like killed all the other Starks on us. Why wouldn't they kill Jon on us too? They already killed like Catelyn and Robb and Ned, and like, oh my god. So Jon's dead too. Oh my god, like you don't know what to do. And that's what's another thing that's amazing about this show. It's like you don't know what's going to happen. And I will say there was a definite... you could definitely tell when the writers took over. I felt it's like everything just started... They started like... Everything was going like kind of slow. They were slowly building their story, But once the writers took over, they got away from the source material, you could tell they started jogging. And as they started jogging, their pace got a bit quicker. And as they got quicker and they got close to the end, they got quicker and quicker and quicker. And then as they got at the end, they were sprinting and running all the way to the end. So, guess what I think about the last season? We're going to get into that. So, I love this series, and everything from 1 to 7 I say is amazing, and I'd probably give it a 5 stars up to that point. Yeah, but let's get into the 8th season now.
Hey, well, the 8th season, I'm not going to have the popular vote, obviously, because I actually really enjoyed the 8th season for lots of really good reasons. I mean, yes, it did have the feeling, you make that happy birthday sign, and you start with the big H and the big A, and then you realize you don't have enough room for the PPY. You know what I mean? So, yes, it did have that squished in feeling and things where we're moving a little bit too quickly and there wasn't as much detail, but what can you do? They only had so much time. However, I cannot hate a season that at the end, it actually did wrap up very, very nicely. You know what happened to everybody. You get to see everybody and all the heads of the all the heads of each house and whatnot, and how they felt about the situation up to that point. And how can you hate a season that actually had that war against the Night King, and the surprises that came with that? Like, the people you thought were going to die didn't die. The people you thought were going to live were just actually lived. And Arya killed the bastard. Like, who saw that coming? I did not. You know? Okay, some people saw it coming, but I did not, and it was very, very surprising to
Steve
me.
put his hand up.
Plenty of stuff I didn't see coming.
So there was that, and then you know, like, and even to the point where, you know, then you find out, you know, it's like, oh, is like, what's Bran gonna do, you know, or whatever. It's like, there's just so much good material in the 8th season. Was it sped up? I can see why people wouldn't like it, but I really, really enjoyed the 8th season because it didn't really leave anything untold, really. You know what happened to the Starks. You know what happened to everybody else. You actually seen the beginning of a somewhat a democracy or whatever at the end, you know what I mean?
You mean when they all laughed at Sam and then Tyrion recommended the same thing and they're like, hey, that's a good idea.
Well, they didn't, as long as they were able to, they agreed to, yes, it's a good idea, but let's keep it between us. You know what I mean? So for all of those reasons, I actually did enjoy the 8th season very much.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so what would you give the 8th season?
I would still give it a 5.
And then the overall series is 5 stars then.
If I could give it 6, I would.
All right, 5 stars and 5 stars. 5 stars for the 8th season and 5 stars for the whole thing altogether for Kathy.
You bet. Yeah.
Cool. Steve.
Now I can understand where you're coming from, because in a very specific way, season 8 was beautiful to watch, and I mean that from a very visual perspective.
Oh yes.
Because when you talk, what I was saying earlier, when I was saying that everything, the adaptation and the execution of the story up until like season 7 or 8 was really well done. Well, this is where I find that the series 8 kind of lacked. It still had amazing cinematography, excellent acting. It still had all those elements that enhanced the story that was coming from the books, but the story itself kind of fell out from under it, because, and I don't blame like the showrunners for that, because they didn't sign on to direct something with no source material. They kind of expected that over a course of a 10-year period, they'd have more material to work with.
We're talking about Weiss and Binoff.
Yeah, Benioff, yeah. David and Dan, as it were, or the D&D.
D&D. Yeah.
So I'm not saying it to diss anybody, but from my perspective at least, it's like the characters. Well, in a lot of ways, I find like what happened is that for season 8 especially, I find that the story started taking precedent over the characters' wants and needs. Because the biggest thing that I found, yes, I didn't necessarily care that, you know, it looked like people could get from Winterfell to King's Landing in 2 days, or what have you. Because that, you know, you expect a certain amount of, let's cut out the middleman.
Yes, exactly.
Especially with so few episodes, which they could have gotten more if they wanted. Like, HBO was like, please do more. And they were like, no, we're done. So you know, that's a different story entirely. But so it's not that some of the parts where it seemed rushed, I kind of agreed with. Let's get to the meat of it. But I found that without the source material, where you have George R.R. Martin, who has written these characters and knows them so well, now you have characters making decisions that do not serve them, that aren't true to their characters. Yeah. And that's where I found the storytelling to be lackluster and upsetting. You know, because you have things like, I don't know if we're going into spoiler.
We've hit spoilers already.
Okay, yeah, because like Tyrion going into the crypts, which everybody's complaining about, or Jaime going back to King's Landing to reunite with his sister.
Goddamn Jaime,
which kind of, you know, subverts and destroys his redemption arc, which is
yes.
Even you know, I mean, Daenerys burning and sacking King's Landing, I think, was in character very much.
It was.
The way they were building her up, yes.
But at the same time, for this to land, we needed a full season of seeing her go downhill at a steep pace. As it is, she's still claiming to be, fighting for people. At the beginning of the series, you still love Daenerys.
Oh, yeah.
And you're supposed to, I suppose. You're supposed to still love her by the end. But you had like a 3-episode period where she goes from being, Queen of Our Hearts to, Queen of the Damned. And that's it, right? So, and that's kind of how I felt with this with the series. It was still like the episode where they sacked King's Landing, where they burnt King's Landing to the ground, was a beautiful episode. It might be one of my favorite episodes just to watch, just to have experienced it. But the character choice, when that's me just putting myself into the episode and watching and enjoying it for the episode. The character choices and just the way the story has been being told now feels like, to go back to Lord of the Rings, a little butter on too much bread.
Yeah.
And that's where I said I just didn't feel like season 8 landed where we wanted it to land, where it should have landed, where it deserved to be.
Right. All right. So, what would your rating be for the 8th season on its own?
The 8th season on its own. You know what? I'm sorry, Kathy, because
that's fine. I know I don't have the popular.
I know you have the popular vote, but I think I gotta give. If I could give 5 stars to the people working behind the scenes on the show, like the actors and the people animating it and just organizing it, I would still give it 5. I would give it 4.55. But because the story is so lackluster, I gotta give it 2 stars.
So you're giving 2 stars to the 8th season?
To the 8th season,
and then the full season. What are you giving?
The full series. The full series. I say I take off a star because of I take off a star for the 8th season. So 4.
Okay, so 2 stars for the 8th season, 4 stars for the whole series.
Yeah. I think. Anyway.
Are we trying to? Well, let's be clear here. Are we trying to separate both ratings so that the whole series leading up to season 8, so season 1 through 7 is what we're rating?
No. So you're gonna give me what you gave the 8th, and then what you give the whole series based on the last season as well.
All right. Wow.
Because Kathy gave the last season a 5, clearly the whole series was still a 5.
Yeah, no, I get that. So, all right. Well, I'm just going to jump right to it. I just know that there's always a lot that we can touch upon. I mean, we've already mentioned a lot of the core mechanics that made this thing really work in terms of a series, and we understood going into season 8 that there were some, for me, it was a lot of the discrepancies. Yes, I'm going to agree with one of them that you had pointed out, Steve. Their characters, to their core, had a certain regiment about them that, as like Arya is one of my favorites, where she became a cold-hearted killer. She's still a young girl, and she shows that every now and then. I think, to me, actually, the most relevant topic of Arya's story arc, especially, which to me stood out a little different, but if I think hard on it, it makes kind of sense. Arya is still a young woman, but she doesn't realize it up until she's actually at the footsteps of King's Landing, trying to get to Cersei and Jaime, specifically Cersei. And who does she run into? The Hound. And the Hound, out of all characters, is the one to talk her out of it because he knows where she's going. She's going to her death. No matter how much of a badass she may seem to think, how much of a badass we feel she is. That's the more important part. Us as an audience, we're rooting for her. At least I was. And I'm thinking, you've killed the Night King, bitch. You can kill whoever you can at this point.
That's what I thought.
However,
why would you just turn around and go back and kill Cersei and Jaime? Like, seriously.
I know. But there's also this case that around them, she's not a one-man army. She's just a single individual trying to
she's Arya, damn it.
Yeah. She's trying to get into this fortress, which is, in my opinion, one of the hardest fortresses to break into, because it is King's Landing, for crying out loud. And more importantly, she had to be turned away from her original mission. So now she's literally fleeing the city while it's being burnt to the ground. So all I see in my eyes during that entire commotion is her trying to flee like a young girl. She's got this look of terror on her face the entire time. And I think I would too, no matter how much of a cold-blooded killer I was. If I had a dragon flying around left and right, burning everything in its path, from children to old people to, it doesn't matter who you are, you're dead. So there was so much going on in that whole respect of the burning of the city that I felt like there was a lot that I didn't agree with and some that I didn't.
So you're saying you agree with Arya acting this way, or you don't agree?
Well, I'm only using it as an example because hers is, in my opinion, one of the biggest differences of change to her character as we saw her from day one all the way to that final episode.
I thought Arya had like the best arc and the most complete arc.
But up until that ending, because I felt like they had to leave her open-ended. She's still a young woman who's still at her innocence in some ways, but she wasn't going to become the Hound. I think that's the part we had to distinguish. She is not the Hound. The Hound is an old fart and no longer in his prime. Not too old, I might add.
Living for vengeance.
But
his whole life.
he's lived. Yeah, exactly. He's lived a life that is so cold that he notices Arya going down that path, so he doesn't want her to become that. And out of all characters, he's the one last person I expected him to do it. So that was actually quite nice to see that he had heart. Yeah. And then that made me even root for him even more so when he went up against the Mountain, right? I'll go back to one of my first things though, the discrepancies. I don't know how many times I've heard comments about how the battle against the dead. How many good soldiers did we lose? Quite a bit, right?
4 or 5.
Like, people were putting ratio numbers to how many units were being lost here. So, the Dothraki, right, was the first one that was always commented on. Let's charge in the middle of battle at the beginning and then go full strong up against an army of the undead. You don't know what the army's capable of, but we'll do it anyway. Well, right away, anyone who knows this, even if you're not a strategist, knows that's a fucking stupid idea. And I've heard so many other comments said the same. So that in itself was already kind of weird.
Scene.
But it was cool because it gave us one of the most breathtaking moments, which was how overwhelming the undead army as a whole, right from the beginning, really was. This wave, this cascading wave of zombies, so to speak, coming on top of, soldiers on horseback. I can't visualize that. And at the same time,
now they couldn't
either. So they created this effective wave of, oh, they're already on top of you. Oh, done. The damage is already done, right? So it created this really overwhelming feel of like, oh my god, they're done. Like, they didn't even have a chance. What about the rest of the army? Like, that was great. Like, this whole build-up to that whole fight was fan-freaking-tastic. However, I'm saying this out loud because I just don't like the way it went. We get to the finale. That scene when when Dany finally gets a chance to do her final speech. When you look out into that field, how many fucking soldiers does she still have?
Yeah, I know.
That's not accurate.
I didn't
I'm sorry
understand
to say
that
this,
either.
but there's too many Dothraki on the battlefield.
I didn't understand how she had less than the Northerners at that point. I thought it would have been
I
about
feel like
even.
she didn't lose anyone. That battle against the undead was for nothing. It didn't mean anything. Not only was that episode a episode, that fight should have been prolonged, in my opinion, for like 2 or 3 episodes. 2, maybe. Because there was so much going on that they should have been just as much build up to it. And they kind of did. But anyway, it was just because of all these discrepancies leading from one episode to the next, leading to that final episode. I mean, I have to take it with a grain of salt in some ways, but that was just too much. She won with what army? The army she had used felt like a disposable army, Like, the North gave her whatever they could. They did their job. They all mostly died. But her Dothraki and all the other ones, the Unsullied even, the Unsullied felt like they were almost barely touched as well.
The thing is that the Unsullied, same thing with the Dothraki, a significant portion of the Unsullied stayed to guard the door so that everybody in the Battle of Winterfell, so that everybody could get inside the walls, and then they're back, And
I mean, no matter how much tension that built, which was great, when I look back on episode 8 and I see all those, those units back on the battlefield, I feel like that was a whole waste of nothing. Like that emotional strain you put me through during that battle against the undead, well, that was all for nothing then. So I might as well scrap that. I think it's just because there was just too much disappointment. By the time we got to that moment where she finally did her final speech, and we got the impression like, oh, she's now a conqueror. She's no longer someone gaining vengeance to reclaim the throne she deserves. Yeah, we got that already.
It's like,
but then we got a whole new breed of conqueror because she then suddenly realizes, oh, I can go.
It's like we're going across the world and we're liberating everybody.
Yeah. The keyword, liberate. It's like, are you sure
your version of liberation is not what you think it is?
Exactly. So then we see that Mad Queen that we knew was going to happen. They've been hinting at it the entire series. We've just been turning a blind eye to it because all we see is this young woman who
I knew all along she was going to be that.
Well,
from the get-go.
She was still violated in so many different ways as a young woman before she got to that point to stand in front of the Iron Throne before it got melted for no reason. That's another problem I didn't like.
Was it no reason, though?
Yay, metaphor, whatever. The point is that, yes, the Iron Throne's not needed. You don't need an actual throne to be the ruler of the land. And that throne is the reason why the Game of Thrones is so deadly. Everyone wants that throne. And I get that. You don't have to fucking melt it just to make it, irrelevant, right? Okay. Anyway.
Who are you telling that to? Drogon or?
I just don't think that scene was necessary. I think it was a forced upon scene.
I think it would have been cooler if Drogon had burned Jon, or like
if Jon would have
fire at Jon.
Yeah.
Because if he spits fire at Jon and Jon doesn't get burned,
because he's Targaryen.
Yeah. That would have been a way cooler visual.
Then he's the chosen one. He's that was one that was meant to be the Prince of Light.
And I'll agree, like the 8th season, it didn't have like I will agree, but I still enjoyed it. You know what I mean? Like,
Let's have him finish up his thought here.
Yeah, sorry. I know I've been ranting.
You have been ranting. Get to your damn rating already.
Wow, you guys don't want me to elaborate, do you? Okay,
you just elaborated for too long. Wrap it up.
Season 8, I might have to say, got only 3.5 out of 5 for me because it had, as Steve had pointed out, a lot of great visuals, a lot of great moments, a lot of great scenes with particular actors playing out their characters in this new scenario. So yeah, 3.5 out of 5 for me. For me as the overall series though, I was gonna give it a great 5 out of 5, but because the way the ending had kind of left a sour taste in my mouth, it's only getting a 4 out of 5 for me now at this point.
Okay.
Maybe 4.5.
Very understandable, and I'm actually, I feel like I'm almost on the same path as you here. So so season 8. I will say this: I enjoyed season 8 all the way up until the. I enjoyed basically season 1 or episodes 1, 2, and 3. I was okay with the first 2 seasons slowly building me up because I was being prepared for the huge battle of Winterfell, which was probably one of my favorite episodes. It's definitely 100% my favorite episode of this season, but it's actually one of my favorite episodes overall. It was really cinematography-wise, it was beautiful, and then
dark.
You thought too dark? I actually didn't see Arya killing the Night King. I didn't expect that. So I fucking jumped out of my seat. I was like, yes! I was so happy. That was actually the biggest I cheered throughout the whole season 8. And then, but once it was done, I was like, where do we go from here? I mean, they beat the White Walkers. How could Cersei even stand a chance against them? Oh, she's got the Golden Company? Ooh, I'm so scared of the Golden Company. What the fucking deal with White Walkers, motherfuckers? I don't give a fuck about the Golden Company. And even the dragon didn't give a fuck of the Golden Company because you saw the Golden Company start, we're so cool. And all of a sudden, big flame, they just die on the spot. I'm like, oh, well, fuck the Golden Company. Yeah. So much for them. And, like, that's exactly what it was. Daenerys got there. It's like, well, we won the battle. Yeah, but everyone's still gonna die. So, flips the switch. The Mad Queen takes over. She burns King's Landing. Kind of saw that coming. And, so like I said, I enjoyed episode 1, 2, and 3. Yeah, so did Bran, apparently. But he didn't let anyone else in on it.
Bran could have solved so many fucking headaches throughout the whole series.
Yeah, but the thing is, they believed him. Right?
Bran's playing the Game of Thrones, man.
Yeah, he played it the best. He didn't have to make any decisions. They did the decision making for him. They put him in power.
Yeah.
God damn.
He knew it was coming. He just had to show up, you know?
Damn you, Bran. Damn you. Love you, but damn you.
Yeah, so anyways, season 8, like, so this is what happened. So after the battle for Winterfell happened, the next episode happened. I don't think anyone really died. I think they might have killed the other dragon in that episode. But I was like, people still didn't really...
Rhaegal got shot, got punked.
Yeah, I know. Which was crazy. What? Who?
Is Rhaegar? I think it's...
Yeah, the dragon. Yeah. Yeah, so the dragon died, so I was like, whoa, but like no one else died. I'm like, okay, we still got a lot of people here, because I think only 5 major characters died in the Battle for Winterfell, and I expected like 50% of the characters to die at that point. And then so I was like, oh, we gotta kill some people off. Come on, we're getting to the end. Next episode happens. Oh, Missandei's like the only one that died. Okay, there's still lots of people left to kill. So we get to the final episode, and I think only Daenerys dies in that episode, and we're like...
You're too bloodthirsty, man.
No, I'm not bloodthirsty. This show has promised me something that it did not deliver upon.
Which is more deaths.
Yeah.
Right, exactly. I wanted that bittersweet ending. I'm actually happy that, most of the Starks, like, our beloved Starks survived at the end, and so did Tyrion. But at the same time, I wanted one more heart-crushing moment, because that's what this show is supposed to do to you. It makes you love to hate it. It's just like, oh my god, I can't believe they killed Ned. Oh my god, I can't believe they killed Robb and Cat. Oh, they can't believe they killed this person, It's shocking, and you're just like, okay, you just expect this. You're like, okay, I wanted the bittersweet ending. Like, I thought maybe when I was done the Red Wedding, I didn't want any more pain. I didn't want any more one of my favorite characters to die. Wrong. I did. I wanted a bittersweet ending. I wanted one more important character to die that made it felt like it was a sacrifice and this was all worth it. And I feel like I didn't get that because they promised me a Game of Thrones type ending and I didn't get a Game of Thrones type ending. I actually got something that was kind of a happy ending. It wasn't a 100% happy ending because not everyone else is happy. As Tyrion says, no one's really happy, so it must be a good compromise. But not in this situation, because I think most people were upset that there wasn't more of a tragic ending, for maybe Jon or Tyrion or someone else who was, really important to the story. And yeah, I felt a little bit empty at the end, and even the way they wrapped it up. They're like, oh, Jon's going to the Wall. Oh, Sansa's Queen of the North. Oh, this is where Arya's going. It's like, okay, well, awesome. I can't wait for season 9 then, guys. Bring it on. Because I didn't get a conclusion. I got the beginning of a whole new Game of Thrones series that they're going to cater to us. They're going to ship out and wrap up to us and make us watch in about 5 years. So we're going to find out about the continued stories of Jon, Arya, and Sansa, more than likely. So, I mean...
No, I think that's...
You think it's done?
Yeah.
Well, I just don't...
The
but
series
why?
they're planning are a bunch of prequels for,
But why not? Why not just kill why not kill one of these characters off, then, if they don't have future plans for them? Because it just seems like everything they set up was for future shows. It's like, why wouldn't you give a final ending to these characters so we know it's done?
I know I have a theory, but I'll let you go first, Steve.
I didn't mind, the very final episode. Oh, yeah,
I'm gonna
do your ratings, yeah.
I'm going to do my ratings, and then we'll get into that.
Sorry.
No, it's okay.
Jumping the gun.
It's okay. So I think I would have given it a 5, but the season 8 kind of brought me down quite a bit. Like you said, season 8 was still beautifully done. The acting's still good. Everything is still there. It's just the story wasn't where it was supposed to be. So because of the effects and the acting and everything's still good, I'm going to give it a 4. 4 for season 8, but I'm not going to give this whole series 5 stars now. It's probably going to be more like... I'll say 4.5, because honestly, season 1 to 7 is still really excellent. It's just 8 that kind of led us on a sour path, and it's like, I can't be that upset because, Stark still lived, I guess. I just wanted a better ending, because the writing was so good, I expected a better sweet ending.
I think you're saying there was a stark contrast between the quality of the season before season 8 and...
Yeah, let's just say that Endgame did what Game of Thrones couldn't in this final episode. They killed a Stark.
Killed a Stark, yeah.
Spoiler!
Wow.
They killed a bunch of Starks. They're just not the ones... They killed them all early on and then let the rest of them live.
Alright, so back to what you're saying.
Right, so what I was saying, just to your point about how you didn't like the conclusion, I actually thought the last episode was pretty well done. I thought the conclusions for most of the characters were fine.
Fine.
I thought in some cases I thought they were really good. Bran certainly wasn't my top choice for king.
or anyone else's choice.
Well, I think that's why he was probably...
I think he was the default pick, because everyone understood.
He's like the Maggie Simpson. That's the choice, right? It's like, who shot Mr. Burns? Oh, it's Maggie Simpson. Yeah. You're like, oh, all right, I guess.
but in terms of, Sansa being Queen of the North, I thought that was a great resolution.
Yeah, I like that.
I thought, because that's all she's pushing for in the last 2 seasons is independence for the North,
for Winterfell to be independent, right?
And she's she's getting it, So I thought she got what her character needed.
Yep.
Arya going off to explore new lands.
That is definitely a series that they could visit in the future. That's
a series they could visit in the future. I don't think they will, because I don't know if you'd get Maisie Williams involved in that. But Arya going off to explore. More so, I think Arya abandoning her quest for vengeance and trying to seek out new things in herself and in the world is a beautiful way to finish Arya. Because I thought she was great there. Jon going to the north. I kind of wish there was more to Jon, or there was more for Jon. But I also think Jon was a coward for most of the series, so being shunted off behind the wall is probably most of what he deserves.
A coward? Why do you say a coward?
Because he never chose
the throne.
He never chose the throne, but he also never chose to make the decisions before they were forced upon him. Jon gets sent to the wall. Jon gets stabbed and brought back to life. He becomes Lord Commander because there's nobody else to do it. He goes to defeat Ramsay Bolton because he has to. There's never any. I find there's never any internal motivation for Jon. Jon is just the point of view character for us. And so
I am going to disagree because
that's fine.
Because he actually was brave enough to stand up and make the hard choices that other people could not make, which he knew it was the right thing to do, and that's why he did it. He knew people were going to hate him for it, like letting the wildlings stay in the wall, but he did make a hard choice there.
That's fair.
So he was brave enough. He knew what he knew what was going to happen to him, and it ended up happening to him. They all turned on him. They stabbed him. And they tried to get rid of him as the Lord Commander.
Yeah, I guess really my gripe with Jon comes like after he leaves the wall mostly, because that's when things get more overtly political, and he's serving Dany.
I do agree. I mean, it's hard to see him bend the knee to Dany, but he knew they needed her troops to survive against the White Walkers.
Yeah, but I think he could have once he knew that he had a case for him on the throne, he could have done it. I'm just saying. I think that Jon.
He's very Ned in that. He's very much like Ned.
There you go. Yeah, he's very much Ned Stark. He's bound to honor, bound to his commitments, but I don't think that he learned anything
because he knows nothing
until the very last
and he still knows
scene
nothing
where he stabs Daenerys.
Well, he's very much a classic anti-hero, though.
So
that's the way I see Jon as the whole time.
Yeah, but come on.
Yeah, but hold on.
The reluctant hero.
You have to understand though
Aragorn
that he's the
was
kind
also a
of.
reluctant
You
hero.
have to understand he's the kind of character that he did not want to make those choices, yet he was always forced to do it. You guys just said it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
He's forced in these circumstances. The fact that he made the right choices, the hardest ones of all, makes him the hero. But at the same time, he's still trying to avoid all these conflicts, and they seem to keep coming to him.
Yeah.
And I think there's a reason for it because, well, by blood, being part Targaryen, obviously there was a reasoning for him always being put on the forefront. But I always had a theory, two theories that I kind of want to throw out there. One tied in with Jon. I actually expected him to die, to be completely honest.
Me too.
He had a type of story arc that he's the romantic hero that a lot of the women fall for, right? I mean, he's soft on the eyes, he's he's charismatic, but he's charismatic in different ways. He's not, out in forefront, garnering attention from everyone around him. He does the polar opposite. He tries to, stay in the shadows and avoid confrontation. But he's always put in that position. So that's partly why I expected Jon to die at the end, because that would have made the formidable, this whole time I kept fighting the fights that I didn't want to fight. Now I'm fighting the ultimate fight that I thought I would never do, which is kill the one queen that I've fallen in love with. And that's pretty heartbreaking. I get the whole romance of having them in their final moment and then him stabbing her. But at the same time, there's got to be some repercussions to such an act.
I think...
Which is the army waiting for you out there. By the way, I just killed your queen and it's in the other room there. You might want to cuff me. Okay.
I still maintain, I think the best death for Jon in that moment would have been Drogon coming up, burning him with fire, him not burning. Then Drogon's like, okay, I'm just going to eat you. And then he eats him. Then it's done.
Well, okay. Well, that's true. But I have to admit, though, it also wouldn't have created the ending, which I kind of expected.
Yeah.
Okay. I got to backtrack here. You guys all obviously are familiar with the creation of the White Walkers, right? Why they were made in the first place?
Yeah.
They were a weapon against man.
Yeah.
But
made by the Children of the Forest.
Made by the Children of the Forest. But they were made in such a way that I didn't expect them to be such a formidable force that they were a threat to everyone, right? So it was like a plague that started to spread. Now that the plague was wiped clean at the Battle of Winterfell, the question then becomes, well, how come that whole phrase comes, winter is coming? I thought that was a little bit of a weird comment to make. I get that it ties in with the Stark House and what they believe. Yeah. But then there's also the indirect relation with the White Walkers, how winter is coming. And it's up to the north to keep the rest of the world, safe from, the winter that keeps coming. So this cycle, as I would see it in my mind, I always thought it would be pretty cool if they figured out a way, which they did, to end the series where who goes up north? Someone quite important, I might add. Jon ends up going to the north. I would be surprised if another series comes down the line and then he's the next Night King somehow. Because the King of the Wildlings, they only survive out there because they stayed above north of the wall. But they were forced to do that. Now that he's made that choice to go north of the wall, are the Children of the Forest going to go through the same cycle of, man's now inhabiting this part of the land that we thought this would never happen again? I thought we scared them away.
No, I think the children of the forest are all dead.
No.
Right? Weren't they all?
I think they were kind of killed. Yeah.
Weren't they last of them killed?
Were those the last ones? I don't know.
They said they were. They said they were. So if we trust the information given, they're dead.
It's just there's just too many subtleties, and I feel like that's when seeing Jon leave. It was that scene of seeing Jon and all the wildlings walk into the forest. They had that same effect. Like I could have sworn that was the same shot in the forest where they would have had the guys running through the trees with that set of White Walkers.
Oh,
remember
probably.
That first.
It did look
introduction
like
to
a
the White
familiar
Walkers?
scene. So
I wouldn't be surprised if they did that purposely, just so that you
for
can
sure.
tie them in.
Maybe.
Definitely.
And then the same could be said about why all the Stark family members, the remaining members, had happy endings. My theory was that it had all to do with the contrasting effect, which was the entire series of having to see all of our beloved heroes getting killed off one by one, and most of them quite brutal deaths, which left us quite pissed off, as you had pointed out earlier, right? But that drove us forward. We wanted to see them come back and have revenge, and they did. But then what do you do when you've gotten revenge? And you don't go out and go out and more revenge. You walk away, and you've now, That's the thing. This kind of an ending is not what we wanted, but it's the one they decided to give to us.
I'm pretty sure everyone can agree that everyone wanted to see a better death for Jaime and Cersei.
They do.
Oh,
yeah.
I think the two that needed to die, and I say the word need because it was almost needed to give us that last final kill, as the Game of Thrones series does. I really do feel Jon and Tyrion were the two that had to die. They both had really valid reasons to get killed. They both were willing to die, given the circumstances. They finally liberated the land of all the tyrants and all of the threats. All they knew now left was how do they live their lives from here on end? Well, Jon killed the love of his life. I don't know how you can live from that.
Was she the love of his life? Isn't Regret or Egret or what's her name, the red-headed wildling, more like the love of his life?
That's his first.
Yeah, so that's the love of his life, not Daenerys.
No.
Hashtag Jon Ygritte forever.
Yeah, I'm telling you, he didn't love Daenerys as much as he loved her. I'm telling you.
No, he fell for the queen because of the kind of woman she is. I think the woman in the red-headed woman there from the wildling, I think that you're talking about. I think that was just his first. That's the way I see her.
And his first true love.
That's why it was easier.
That's why it was easier for him to put the blade through Daenerys, because he already loved. If he didn't love before that, he would have been able to do it.
I don't think it was easy at all. How many times did he keep
arguing
with those around him?
It was easier because of what happened. He already lost his already true love that he didn't even kill, so it was easier for him to do what he knew what was right and put the blade through Daenerys because he already loved and been through that.
I don't know. I see there's
my theory.
More difficulty in his face and his eyes when he tried to kill.
All right, folks. Who did Jon love more, Egret or Daenerys?
It wasn't Ghost.
It wasn't Ghost. Burn, gone Ghost.
Thank God. I don't want to see him spooning with a dog.
No, but he could have pet him.
He could have pet him.
We're talking about making love to a woman and the women he fell in love with to the dog?
His best friend.
Yeah, I know.
People just wanted to see him pet Ghost. Anyways, we don't have much more time left, so where do we see the series, or where do we see this franchise going from here? Because Game of Thrones is done, but it's very obvious that they are doing more. There is a prequel series coming out next year by HBO. Probably more series coming out, right, in the future. So where do we see this going? Kathy?
I'm not actually sure. There's tons of areas where it could go. You know what I mean? I would like to see the story of Arya. I think that would be very, very cool, because it would be like, it would still be linked to Game of Thrones, but it wouldn't be more of the same.
Let's go to South Taros.
Yeah,
and North Taros.
East Taros.
West Taros.
No, we've already been to Essos.
Yeah,
we've already been to Essos. That's where Daenerys came from.
Yeah, that's true. I would like to see that. I think it'd be interesting if we saw, what Jon does afterwards. Does he actually go back to the White Wall after he,
brings those wildlings?
Because that one guy was always saying...
Does he become caster?
You know what I mean? Like,
Raider.
that would also be an interesting series, but like, honestly,
that's who he would become.
Yeah, I don't know exactly what else they would do with that. Really, there's really great story arcs that they easily could make. Mm-hmm. Whether or not they'll do it, I'm not sure.
Steve, where do you see it going?
Prequels. Nothing but
prequels. So we don't get to see the future from here.
I don't think so, unless they decide to recast, or which is possible. But I think the strength of the show has always lied in the source material, and what's George R. R. Martin been writing the past little while? Nothing but prequels.
Yeah, that's true.
You know, he's got stories about Duck and the Knight and all these Aegon Targaryen and all these people to flesh out the history of Westeros. You know, he's a history buff. He's
The
always
Valerians
been
and all that.
Yeah, the Valerians. He's always been very enamored with the history that he's building for Westeros. So that's, I think, where they're gonna put the show, because they need something to base it on. They need something to bring it to center it around. So
Taboo.
I can kind of agree, actually, Steve, because there's one thing to be said about this series is the way the politics drives the story, right? Because it's all about the Game of Thrones, right? It's all about how they're feuding for the Iron Throne. And that feud is best shown with the characters feuding amongst themselves, you know, in their given circumstances. So I think the prequels make sense to me. It's not what I want to see, though. I have to admit. There could be a lot of good that could come out of these prequels.
Yeah. I'm actually very interested in the prequels.
I am highly interested. Anything Game of Thrones on it, I mean, I'm more than likely going to watch it.
That's what I mean. Despite like how bad, or not how bad, but how much I didn't like this season as much as the other seasons, I'm still excited to see what they do next.
Yeah. And I think that's a big part of the reasons why we kind of understand why they're doing the prequels, because it's a safe route. You know, you're building upon material that builds up to a set of source material, as Steve had said, that's already written, that's already familiar. And I get why we would just immediately relate to it, right? It's we already know where it's coming up, you know, right around the corner after. So for me, I almost want to see what I think Kat had said. It's this idea that Arya, hell yeah,
I would love to see it.
That's
I don't think they're going to do it, but I would love to see it.
Even if like George wrote like a small book on it, just to
he might,
he
might.
And it could be a short series of short novels
Right,
too.
like,
I don't
could be a
care
short
if it's.
one.
I hope
I
she, she, you know, what's Westeros, you know, Dragonlance or Faerun, or I hope she transitions to
It's
another
Middle
fantasy.
Earth!
Yeah, it's Middle Earth.
It's Middle Earth. God.
It turns out Westeros was the Grey Havens the whole time.
Yeah, exactly. So we know they're doing the prequels.
Yeah.
So I'll be excited to see that, because I think it's gonna be very much of the origin of Westeros. Eh? That's what they're basing it on. I think so. That'll be either way. I don't care. It'll be cool either way, because I know so much about it now thanks to this series that I'm gonna be like, oh, it's that thing, right? And then I'll get a bigger picture of what this world is like. That's gonna be neat.
It'd be interesting if they did something, you know, like how the Wall was created or things like that. Because you could do like a pure fantasy series, where they really dive deep into the magic that has kind of leaked out of Westeros by the time the season begins.
Yeah, because we got only a hint of magic in this particular world. It's almost like as if it was flushed out of society,
I would
like
be
it was
surprised if
frowned
they
upon.
fleshed out more about the Night King and things like that, and how those things came about.
Yeah, that would be cool.
Well, what should we call it in terms of an alchemy? Sorry, I know I keep catching up to you, but alchemy-wise, that material that the Dragonfire, you know, that in itself was an interesting substance, but it's just no more than alchemy when you really think of it.
Yeah.
But that in itself is what the closest thing to magic that we got up until the Red Woman, right? That was the most amount of magic I think we ever got throughout the whole series.
Yeah.
Dragons, getting a bit on fantasy, but that's just because they don't exist. But they're
well,
still
the White Walkers are magic too.
They're built by magic. Yeah, you're right.
Exactly. All right, so I could totally see an Arya series, and you know what? I don't doubt it. Give it 10 years, I wouldn't doubt if they cast these. If they cast Sophie Turner, Maisie Williams again, and you know, if they dump enough money off the Kid Harington, I'm sure he'll play Jon Snow one more time, even if it's just to die in the first episode of the new series, you know? So, yeah, or to become the Night King, as Dabu might have...
please do. Please do.
So, 10 years from now, who knows? I mean, you never know. You didn't think you'd see Han, Leia, and Luke back in a Star Wars movie again, so that happened. So you never know. Anyways, I'm very excited for what's to come for Game of Thrones, and I'm happy that I'm still a fan despite the last season not living up to our expectations. But hey, the rest of the series was good, so I'm not gonna I'm not gonna moan and gripe and complain, because the rest of the series was great. Like, I mean, I would have given it a 5. You know, so I can't. Whatever. Last season was as good as we wanted it to be, but still a great series. All right, so anything else you guys want to add to that?
I just want to say a big, great thank you to everyone who was involved making that series, because there was so much involved.
Because we know you listen to our show regularly.
Yeah, exactly. If this somehow gets to you guys, then yay. It's the fact that there's so much talent in the making of a show like this. You know, not just the casting or the music or the story writers. Everything had to come into place to work beautifully. Otherwise, one little piece out of place would not have worked. So thank you.
Like the last season. Yep. All right, so you can always follow the conversation on Twitter at We Promise Nothing. Drop the G. Give us a big old like on Facebook, because we like when you do that. Go to YouTube, subscribe to us, like, share our videos. We are the We Promise Nothing Show. Check out Late Night Ticket on Eastlink and JPar Plays on YouTube. This is JPar signing out.
Kathy, saying later.
Steve, my watch has ended.
Dabu going bye-bye.
And all our watch has ended. And if you disagree with that, you can leave a comment below. But as always, we promise nothing. Good night. Winter is coming.